There is a $4 powder sitting in your kitchen right now that destroys roof moss better than any product a contractor will ever sell you. The Amish in Lancaster County have been using it since 1910. Every single roof in their community is still on its first deck. You know what it is. You know what it means. And you know the quote the roofer gave you last spring to deal with, it was somewhere between $9 and $3,000. Drive 2 hours west into Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Look up at any Amish farmhouse built before your grandfather was born. Not a single green patch, not one black streak, not a lifted shingle anywhere. And they have never once called a roofing contractor. The first time I walked through a farm near Gordonville, I stood in the driveway for 10 minutes just staring at that roof. The wood underneath was from 1911. The surface looked cleaner than my 4-year-old asphalt shingles back home in Ohio. The old man standing next to me smiled and told me it cost him about $1 a year to keep it that way. What he showed me that afternoon came from a county extension document buried since 1948. A powder sitting in almost every American kitchen right now. And a $76 billion roofing industry has spent 3 generations making sure you never connect the two. If you already own your home, this matters more to you than anyone building new. You need to understand something about moss before we go any further. Moss is not dirt. Moss is not a stain. Moss is a living plant, and it is eating your house right now. It pulls water out of the air through its leaves because it has no roots. It holds that water against your shingles for weeks at a time. Every wet day, every foggy morning, every dewy sunrise, the moss is soaking and pressing that moisture down into the asphalt granules that are supposed to protect you from the weather. The Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association published the exact mechanism in plain English. Moss lifts the leading edge of the shingle. Water travels sideways underneath. The roof deck begins to rot from below while the surface still looks intact from the ground. By the time you can see damage from your driveway, the plywood underneath has usually been wet for 3 to 5 years. That is when you get the $9,000 bill and the contractor tells you the whole deck needs replacement. Now, here is what nobody tells you at Home Depot. Moss grows almost exclusively on the north-facing slope of your roof, the side that sees less direct sunlight, the side that stays damp the longest after every rain, the side with the overhanging branches you never thought to trim. In North America, moss concentrates on that one plane, because that one plane holds moisture long enough for spores to germinate. Every spore that lands on a warm, sunny, south-facing shingle dies within hours. The spores that land on the shaded side find heaven. The Amish figured this out generations ago because they had no choice. When your community does not use electric pressure washers, when your budget does not include a $7,000 re-roof every 20 years, when your barn, your house, and your grandfather's house all need to last a century, you learn to watch the roof the way a farmer watches the sky. You learn the difference between weather and wear. You learn that prevention costs pennies and cure costs thousands. I asked the man in Gordonville how often he inspects his roof. He looked at me like I had asked him how often he breathed. Every week. Every single week. After the heavy chore of feeding, he walks the perimeter of his house and looks up. Not for shingles, not for leaks. He is looking for one thing, the first hint of green on the north side, because once he sees it, he knows exactly what to do, and he knows the cost will be under $5. The average American homeowner spends between $12,000 and $18,000 on their first roof replacement, then $8,000 to $12,000 on the second one. Then they wonder why their house costs so much to own. The Amish family in the next township over has paid zero to their roof in 6 decades. Not because they built it differently, but because they maintained it differently. And the maintenance they use was documented in a 1948 county extension bulletin that somehow disappeared from every public library reading list by 1962. You need to understand who decided you should not know this, because the moment you see the name attached to the decision, everything about the last 40 years of your home ownership will start to make sense. In the years right after World War II, American shingle manufacturers had a problem. Returning soldiers were buying homes faster than the industry could build them. Asphalt shingle production tripled between 1946 and 1955. But asphalt shingles had a dirty little secret that woodshake and slate did not have. They were food for moss. The porous granule surface held moisture. The organic matte decor-fed microbes. Every asphalt roof in a humid climate had a built-in expiration date, and that date was roughly 20 years shorter than the roofs their fathers grew up under. The industry had a choice: fix the product or hide the problem. They chose the second option. Starting in the mid-1950s, trade associations funded a quiet campaign to reframe moss as an inevitable consequence of weather rather than a preventable maintenance issue. Extension bulletins that recommended cheap prevention techniques were quietly removed from circulation. Roofing contractors were trained to sell replacement rather than treatment. And the homeowner was taught that a mossy roof meant a failed roof, when in reality, a mossy roof meant nothing more than a neglected weekend. The Amish never received this messaging. They do not read industry magazines, they do not watch television commercials, they do not hire roofing contractors from Angie's List. They kept doing what their grandfathers did in 1910, which is what their grandfathers did in 1870, which is what German farmers in the Rhineland had been doing since the 1600s. They kept the moss off with materials they already owned, and their roofs kept lasting 80, 90, 120 years. Here is what the 1948 bulletin contained. A simple recipe: 9 parts plain baking soda to 1 part powdered borax. Dry application. Sprinkle along the ridgeline of the roof on a dry day in early autumn. The next rainstorm carries the mild alkaline wash down across every shingle on the slope below. The pH shift is enough to kill every moss, spore, and algae cell on contact. It is not enough to harm the shingle, the gutter, the downspout, or the garden bed beneath. And because baking soda costs about $1 a pound and borax costs about $4 a box, the entire annual treatment for a standard American home comes in under $5. A Reddit homeowner thread from last spring confirmed it independently. Quote, "I can confirm that baking soda kills the moss on roofs, asphalt, and cement. The local companies around here spread it along the ridge, and the rain does the rest." End quote. That was one homeowner in Oregon who stumbled onto what the Amish have known for 4 centuries. What the industry buried in 1955, what the extension office quietly stopped printing in 1962, the zinc strip companies know this too. That is why they sell you a $40 strip of metal that does exactly the same job with exactly the same chemistry, only slower and weaker. When rain hits zinc, it releases zinc ions that raise the surface pH and kill moss. When rain hits baking soda on your ridge, it raises the surface pH and kills moss. Same mechanism. One costs $40 installed, the other costs less than $4 at the grocery store. Zinc strips require roof access and proper installation under the top course of shingles. That installation requirement alone is enough to funnel the average homeowner into a $200 service call. The powder method requires nothing more than a stepladder and a dry afternoon, which is exactly why you were never told about it. Now, if you already own a house and think this only applies to new builds, stay with me. Most of you live in a home built somewhere between 1955 and 1985. Your roof has been replaced at least once, maybe twice. The shingles you have now are somewhere between 3 and 18 years old. Every single one of those shingles can be saved, extended, and protected with the same technique the Amish use on wood shakes from 1911. You do not need to rip anything off. You do not need a contractor. You do not need a permit. Here is exactly what to do this weekend. Pick a dry Saturday in September, October, or early November. Make sure the roof surface is completely dry and that rain is in the forecast within the next 7 to 10 days. Take a cheap plastic hand crank seed spreader, the kind you can buy at a feed store or hardware store for about $15. Fill it with a 9-to-1 mix of plain baking soda and 20 Mule Team borax. Both ingredients are in the laundry aisle of any grocery store in America. Climb a ladder to the gable end of your roof. You do not need to walk on the roof. You do not need to stand on the ridge. Reach up from the ladder and crank the spreader so the powder lands along the top 18 inches of the slope right under the ridge cap. Work your way along the edge, one ladder position at a time. A standard 2,000 square foot home takes about 40 minutes and uses roughly 2 pounds of the mixture. Total cost under $4. The next rain dissolves the powder slowly and washes it down across every single shingle on the slope below. The pH wash kills every moss colony on contact, every algae streak on contact, and every spore that tries to germinate for the next 8 to 10 months. The roof looks cleaner after the second rain than it did the day the shingles were installed. I watched a neighbor in Millersburg do this on a roof that was 19 years old and already had dark streaks halfway down the north slope. 3 weeks later, the streaks were gone. The shingles underneath looked like they had 4 more years of life than the roofer had quoted him. Do this once a year, every autumn, and you add between 10 and 20 years to the service life of your existing roof. Do the math. A roof replacement costs an average of $14,300 in 2024 money, according to the National Roofing Contractor data. Delay that replacement by 12 years, and you have personally recovered $14,000 by spending $48,000 over those same 12 years. That is a return of roughly 29,000% on a box of baking soda. Your shingles do not wear out from the top down. They wear out from the bottom up. The asphalt mat underneath the granule stays flexible and waterproof for decades, as long as moss and algae do not pull moisture down into it. Freeze-thaw cycles do not crack the mat. When you stop the moss, you stop moisture retention. When you stop moisture retention, you stop freeze-thaw damage. When you stop freeze-thaw damage, you keep the mat flexible. And a flexible asphalt mat can easily last 40 years instead of 20. This is why the Amish wood shake roofs from 1911 are still watertight in 2024. The wood was never allowed to stay wet long enough for fungus to establish. The fungus was never allowed to establish long enough for rot to begin. Every week, every season, every year, the owner walked the perimeter and looked up. Prevention, not cure. Pennies, not thousands. The discipline of a farmer who knows the roof is not decoration. It is the single most important structural element keeping his family dry, warm, and alive through a Pennsylvania winter. I want to tell you about the branches. Because if you do not deal with the branches, even the powder cannot save you. Every oak, maple, pine, or walnut tree within 30 feet of your house drops organic material on your roof every single day. Leaves in the fall, pollen in the spring, needles all winter, seed pods in the summer. That material settles into the grooves between your shingles. It decomposes. It holds moisture. It becomes the perfect seedbed for moss spores carried by wind from a quarter-mile away. The tree you love for its shade is the single largest contributor to the destruction of your roof. The Amish manage this with ruthless precision. No tree branch is ever allowed to hang over a roof. Not one. The standard distance maintained in every Old Order community I have visited is a minimum of 10 feet of horizontal clearance between the nearest branch tip and the nearest point on the roof. If a tree grows into that zone, the tree is pruned. If the tree cannot be pruned without killing it, the tree is taken down. Not because the Amish dislike trees, but because they understand that a single overhanging limb will cost them a roof deck replacement within 15 years. And a roof deck replacement means 300 man-hours of community labor they would rather spend on the next barn raising. The Oregon State University Extension Service published this exact principle in their moss control guidelines. Conifer branches shading a roof lead to moss problems. Remove or thin overhanging branches. Remove debris before rain. Keep the roof clean. Annual maintenance is essential to minimize moss growth. Those 4 sentences contain more practical value than every roofing contractor sales pitch you have heard in your life. And they were sitting on a Free State University website the whole time. Walk behind any Amish farmhouse and count the trees near the structure. You will find fruit trees in the orchard. You will find windbreak rows at the property line. You will not find a single shade tree within striking distance of the roof. The house sits in sunlight. The roof dries within 2 hours of every rainstorm. Moss cannot establish because moss cannot find enough consecutive damp hours to germinate a single spore. The geometry of the property is itself a moss prevention system. Now look at your own yard. That maple you planted 30 years ago because your wife wanted shade on the patio. Those branches that now extend 6 feet past the gutter line. The pine on the north side that drops needles into the valley of your roof every November. Every one of those is a moss subsidy, and you are paying the subsidy in the form of shortened shingle life and premature replacement quote. Here is the weekend project that pairs with the powder treatment. Before you apply the baking soda and borax, spend one Saturday clearing every branch that hangs within 8 feet of your roof line. You do not have to remove the trees. You only have to remove the branches that overhang the roof. Use a pole saw from the ground when possible. Hire a local tree service for anything above 20 feet. The cost of pruning 15 branches is usually between $300 and $500. That one-time cost, combined with the annual $4 powder treatment, will outperform every $7,000 chemical treatment a roofing company will ever try to sell you. There is one more layer to this: gutters. Clogged gutters backwater up under the lowest course of shingles and create a permanent moisture zone along the eave. Moss loves that zone, algae loves that zone, wood rot loves that zone. The Amish clean their gutters twice a year, every year, without exception. Spring and late fall. 10 minutes per gutter run. No power tools, no contractors. Just a ladder, a gloved hand, and a bucket. If you have not cleaned your gutters since the last presidential election, you have been funding the roofing industry whether you knew it or not. The combination of those three habits, no overhanging branches, clean gutters twice a year, and one autumn powder application is the entire Amish roof maintenance system. That is it. There is no fourth step. There is no secret product. There is no proprietary solution. There is discipline, observation, and $4 of laundry powder. But there is one final element. The part that came out of the 1948 extension document and was buried so thoroughly that even most Amish families under 40 have forgotten exactly where it came from. This is the part that changes everything. The document was titled Roof Moss Control in Humid Climates and was published by the Pennsylvania State College Extension Service in the spring of 1948. It was authored by an agricultural economist named Raymond Beische. Beische grew up in an Amish family in Holmes County, Ohio, left the community to earn a degree, and spent the rest of his career quietly documenting the farming and household practices of the old order communities before they could be lost. His 1948 bulletin was distributed to roughly 400 county extension offices across the Northeast and the upper Midwest. By 1962, it had been pulled from nearly every one of them, replaced with industry-sponsored materials that recommended chemical treatment and shingle replacement instead. Beische documented something that neither Reddit homeowners nor modern extension websites seem to remember. The powder treatment works. The branch clearance works. The gutter cleaning works. But there is a fourth element, and this is the one that makes the difference between a roof that lasts 40 years and a roof that lasts 120. The fourth element is the attic. Specifically, the movement of air through the attic space directly beneath the roof deck. Beische observed that every Amish farmhouse built before 1920 had the same detail: a continuous opening along the ridgeline of the roof, and continuous openings along the soffits at the eaves. Not vents in the modern sense. Actual gaps built into the framing that allowed outside air to enter at the bottom of the attic and exit at the top, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The constant airflow did something remarkable. It kept the underside of the roof deck the same temperature as the outside air, which meant the roof deck dried from the inside out, not just the outside in after every rain. A roof that dries from both sides cannot stay damp long enough for moss to establish on top and cannot stay damp long enough for rot to establish underneath. The shingles last because the deck stays dry. The deck stays dry because the air never stops moving. The air never stops moving because the house was designed over 110 years ago by people who understood that a building is a living system that breathes. Modern American homes built after 1975 were sealed shut in the name of energy efficiency. Insulation was stuffed into every cavity. Soffit vents were blocked by blown-in cellulose. Ridge vents were installed but often capped improperly. The attic became a moisture trap. The roof deck became a petri dish, and the shingles above began rotting from the day they were installed. Here is what Beische's 1948 document instructed for existing homes. Go into your attic on a dry autumn day. Bring a flashlight. Walk the perimeter where the roof meets the outside wall. Look at every set opening. If you see insulation blocking the airflow, pull it back by 8 inches. Install a simple cardboard or foam baffle, available at any hardware store for about $2 each, to hold the insulation away from the vent. Do this every 4 feet, along every exterior wall in your attic. The total cost for a standard home is between $30 and $60. The total time is one Saturday afternoon. That single afternoon of work, combined with the annual powder treatment and branch clearance, replicates exactly what the Amish farmer in Gordonville has been doing since his grandfather built the roof in 1911. The roof dries from both sides. The moss cannot establish. The deck cannot rot. The shingles last 2 to 3 times their rated service life. And you stop being a customer of the $76 billion roofing industry for the rest of your life. This is what they buried. This is what Raymond Beische wrote down in 1948. And what trade associations spent the next 15 years scrubbing from every public record they could reach. Not because the technique was dangerous, but because the technique was free. You just recovered something that was taken from you 3 generations ago. A $4 powder, a 10-foot rule, a cardboard baffle, and a Saturday afternoon. That is the entire system that has kept Amish roofs watertight for 120 years, while your neighbors replace theirs 3 times. Walk outside tomorrow morning. Look up at the north side of your house. If you see a single patch of green, you know exactly what to do.